Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Breakthrough. So good to be here. Are you okay, Sean? Okay. All right. One of those days.
It's one of those days.
No problem.
Under the weather. Hopefully it's not COVID or dengue.
Why did you all seat me next to this man? Anyway.
You chose to be here. You chose to be here.
Okay. And with that being said,
Yep.
the maybe infectious man right next to me, hopefully not. I just think the Sahara dust is punching you in the face today.
Nah.
I think that's the case.
Nah.
I think that's the case. We're not going to mention the swarm of mosquitoes.
I mean, if you want to, ignorance is bliss.
Okay, and in my ignorance.
Not something I should say on my other show, folks, but we'll get away with it here on Breakthrough somehow.
Shawn Michaels Small, a man with no boundaries and no borders. But anyway, speaking of borders, the conversation that we have in store for you all is quite interesting. So we have with us musician and conductor, internationally qualified and acclaimed musician and conductor, somebody who I am personally very proud of, Andrew Samlal. Good morning, Andrew.
Hi, good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. So you're from Trinidad. You did your bachelor's in music at the UE Department of Creative and Festival Arts, right? We were only like a couple years or a year or two apart. And you went on to further your studies abroad. Tell us about that journey a little bit.
Well, yeah, you covered the initial part of it. So I did the bachelor's at UE, and in the final year, I was wondering what I'm going to do after I graduated. And I spoke to Mr. Murray, who was then the head of the department, and he was suggesting possibly looking into graduate degree programs. And I knew that he went to Temple, so I considered it. And the piano programs that Temple had, they had solo piano, but then they also had a collab piano, which gave you the opportunity to either work with instrumentalists or singers. And at that time, I was doing a lot of vocal accompanying. I was doing work with Lydians. I did a couple sessions with the Love Movement. I did individual freelance work with singers on the island. So I thought, might as well do the focus that gives me the opportunity to work with singers, because if it's a viable career opportunity, it's quite lucrative, and then I didn't know, but I'm really grateful now that when I actually did come to the US to do the master's in collab piano and opera coaching, it gave me the option to really immerse myself in opera, which came with diction coaching, studies in how to be a rehearsal pianist for operatic productions, and then midway through the masters as well too, I fell in love with conducting, and so I did conducting studies, opera conducting studies. I even did a little bit of choral conducting, just to try to test the waters as much as possible. And yeah, so I did the collab piano degree at Temple here in Philadelphia, which was 2 years. And then after that, I applied for work authorization. They call it OPT. So I got that. I worked for a year as a pianist and as a freelance conductor as well. I'm towards the end of that year now, and then I prepare to go off to Maryland in the fall to do my doctorate in conducting at the University of Maryland. So that's where I'm at now.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Samlal, some might say, you have gone abroad, taken your skills, and flew away, literally, on a jet plane. Don't know when you'll be back again. Some might say you have left your country behind. You have betrayed us. But the flip side of that is you are looking to have a career in a field that, well, first of all, you're looking at opportunities, and artistic opportunities, they're not as easy. It's not as though you could just be an entrepreneur and say, I'm going to be a musician. That is a highly contested field. But you're also looking at something very specialized as well, to some extent anyway. And these are not necessarily opportunities that you're going to find here. What does it mean to you to, first of all, be able to just, to follow this path that you might not have even necessarily known was available to you when you started with your bachelor's however many years before?
That's a good question. And I think the answer to that question is connected to when I decided to go into music full-time at the very beginning. Because my initial plan before even doing the bachelor's at UE was to study what might be considered a safer route for career. I was planning to do like accounting and business stuff, and I think the work opportunities in that route is a bit easier. But then I reached a point in Form 6 at St. George's College where I was like, no, I spent my days thinking about music, and at that point, like really focusing so much on playing the piano. That one day I had a conversation with my mom, and I told her, I want to go into music full time. And this is all tied to my religious belief in my family that when God has a specific plan for you, you want to try to be sensitive and go along with it. So I think the opportunities to study music now and to do piano and coming to the States, and because as you rightly said, it's very difficult now as a musician to get a lot of work opportunities, even in the US. More so as a conductor, because I think it's easier to, if you're a pianist, to get an instrument and to get like work opportunities in a church or a synagogue, or even with singers or musical theater productions, but no one is like really handing you an orchestra to conduct. But that being said, because I was, at that point in time, we believed that this was the plan that God had for us, and for me to do the master's and then come to the States and study. It's not that opportunities just kind of fell in my lap, but I followed a specific trajectory that, in which case I prepared myself for the opportunities that God had for me. So one way is that coming to do the master's at Temple, I got into contact by chance with some friends. I was there, for instance, a really hardcore example is I was the rehearsal pianist for the choral conducting seminar at Temple, because I really wanted to immerse myself in conducting. And by chance, one of the professor announced there was this reading orchestra that meets every week, and encouraging the choral conductors to go. And I was really interested, so I went. And then again, I met the director of the orchestra. We spoke, we became really good friends, and I really started to conduct. I got the position of vice president of the orchestra the next year. And through him, he sent me on the last day of the apprenticeship the opportunity to get the Philadelphia Ballet conducting apprenticeship. And that, again, it was not a planned thing. It came through the grapevine. And in my opinion, I think all of that came from being sensitive to, well, God wants me to do this degree, come here. And the reason why I say it's God as well too is I got the flight to come to do the master's at a time when flight was closing in Trinidad. It was during the height of the COVID season. And my initial flight got canceled, and right before the date was going to close for me to leave, I got another flight, and then I came, as you said, on a jet, not literally a jet, but I came on a plane, and I started the degree. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I think when God has a plan for you, it might seem difficult on a very practical level, but it somehow works out. It works out, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's really, I can't help but feel somewhat inspired by your story, because in many ways, the initial plan was to do the master's, and then things just sort of, I know you won't say, but I will say, things just kind of fell into place.
Accelerated.
Right? Accelerated.
Because it sounds like I'm in a similar situation. You kind of got the job you was getting education for in the first place. But you didn't necessarily finish the education when you got the job.
No.
Right. And so, what are some of the? So I guess it'll be fair to say you were focused on the one thing, and because you're so focused on the one thing, and you're focused on learning, and to quote you just now, you said immerse yourself into the thing, because conducting was a very new thing for you, right? You'd done piano for a very, very long time, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't something that you picked up on, but it was something that you're definitely interested in. And there's a certain sense of humility and a certain sense of innocence that someone has to have in order to fully, when you're willing to fully immerse yourself into something that is very, very new, right? What are some of the key things that you would have learned along those journeys? Because obviously you would know people down here, you would have met people abroad, and you would have talked and, you know, compared notes and people's journeys. But in your own experience, what are some of the things that you learned?
That's a great question, because it took me a long time to be bold enough to say that I want to go into conducting. As you said, for years I was a pianist, and you know, I was well enough on the instrument to be able to get by working with singers to have a career. But then, yeah, I reached a point where I couldn't think about anything but not only just the act of moving my hand, but the symphonic repertoire. And the nice thing about being in the US is that there are, and particularly being attached to a larger university, is that there are opportunities for people who want to expand to do other things. I think that's one of the difficulties about having a passion for, let's say, conducting in Trinidad, because we have, at least as far as I know, we have the Youth Philharmonic, and we have the National Philharmonic, and then the National Steel Ensemble. But there aren't as much orchestral conducting opportunities for people who might be interested in this field. So when I came here, and particularly being at Temple, where and that reading orchestra, the aim of the reading orchestra was to give young conductors who had never conducted before an opportunity to step on the podium in a very inclusive, warm environment, where, you know, you, even if mistakes occur, you're amongst your peers, and everyone is there knowing that you're there to learn as well as have fun. And I remember the first piece of music I conducted with that ensemble. It was Wagner's Siegfried. And I mean, for anyone that knows, if you're now starting conducting, Wagner is not the person you really start with. But somehow I got through the excerpt I got, and the musicians, you know, they smiled at me in the end. So that was enough encouragement to keep going. And I mean, you know, in my case, because the master's degree was in piano, I had to sort of finagle my way and try to include conducting as much as possible, because my classes were piano-based. The nice thing is that although my classes were piano-based, because I was doing opera coaching, the coach that I studied with, he knew that I was passionate about conducting, and so he gave me opportunities to conduct opera scenes. And, you know, my studies in diction, for instance, have been irreplaceable as a conductor, particularly in conducting opera. And that's why I think one of the insecurities that I think a lot of young conductors have, myself included back then, is that I'm in a master's degree in piano. Does that make me disadvantaged to be a conductor? And actually, the further I went along is when I realized that most of the top opera conductors and even symphonic conductors started with their degrees, or not even with a degree, but started as being pianists. And I just came back from Europe, where that's how it is there as well too. Most of the opera conductors started being repetiteurs in the opera house, and they coach the singers, and you know, and then they work their way up. So I'm not that far off from what it seems like the standard development for a conductor is. both in the US and outside of the US as well.
Okay, yes, because we had Natalia Duckwell on the show before, and I asked her the question if if singing is your only skill as a musician, things might be a little bit difficult. And you know, she went on to explain that as artists, we are all multi-skilled, right? And there are certain things that that immerses us into the career a little bit more effectively. And what you're describing there is sort of the same thing, because many of the conductors that you and I know, you know, they would have probably done like started off with piano, or started off with like music education, right? And then they sort of evolved into being able to, and the thing is, you asked the question whether you said you had an insecurity of whether or not just because I've done this, does that make me a conductor? And we really find out that conductors aren't just one thing. They aren't just conductors. They're usually music teachers. They're usually pianists or musicians. Otherwise, it doesn't have to necessarily be limited to piano. They're also very good. Some of them are very good vocal coaches. Some of them are singers themselves. You know, some of them could do all of the above. You know, so it's very interesting, and that's a point that I want to make for people out there who are thinking of getting into the music sphere or the artistic sphere in the industry and making a career out of it. You multi-skilled, multi-hyphenate is kind of the way to go. Is the nature of the game, right? Just because you're focused on one thing doesn't mean you have to do anything. You know, doesn't mean you can't branch out.
Well, and to connect with what you're saying, just a short quote that one of my teachers gave me that I think is very, that a lot of people should remember. In a more philosophical way, conducting is an extension of who you are as a person, just like how being a pianist is an extension of your personality on the instrument. But music in general, I think it was Brahms who said music is always about something. So that's something that I thought about a lot. Making music to a certain degree is an end in and of itself. But usually, another purpose for music is that music is a representation of other things. Joy, it could be sadness, it could be a celebration, it could be so. I think just like how music is very multifaceted and conducting is multifaceted, I think it's connected to our personalities as a person as well too.
Yeah, yes, I always say art needs to say something, and what is the space? And it's not just performance art. It could be any kind, or not just what we think of stereotypically as performance art. It could be any kind of expression, endeavor that has any sort of expression, including TV hosts, newspaper reporters to some extent, because writing a business document, right, or an academic, even more important document, still would have obviously and intrinsically a message, but your writing style should all go in line with the message. You know, like you need to understand that even for academics out there. But one of the things that I did want to get, because you went abroad for an academic/artistic purpose, right? And it's interesting because you're going to touch on an aspect of art that is not culturally that deep or widespread in TNT. So you're going to essentially touch on rarely treaded ground here in the country. And you're starting, as you pointed out, you're not necessarily starting with all of this put in place right away. It's kind of falling into place at times. Mm-hmm. You're from TNT, you're from our culture. So I think what a lot of parents might want to know, even if they might not know they want to know it, how was that like, the integration of yourself? Because you said you got certain things from the grapevine. Usually the grapevine is your family, your friends, the network you've established over years. You're not rich and you have grapevine. What sorcery is this? You know, were you able to bridge the cultural gaps as someone who's newly migrated to the States? Because as others have kind of told me in the past, you know, at some point the language of music kind of allows us to bridge the differences. Well, part of the answer I think I gave already. As I said, when
when God has a plan for you, He puts people in your life for that. But another part is music draws people together. But I think what really worked for me a lot is the Trinidadian identity. Because one, you visually look different from the people around you. You sound different from the people around you. So that, I was fortunate to be in an environment where that was appreciated and celebrated. Whenever, for instance, being at Temple, people were always interested to hear me speak because of my accent. People were always interested to hear where I'm from. They're like, oh, where are you from? I'm hearing an accent. And then I go off to say, well, I'm from Trinidad. That's a Caribbean, that's a country in the Caribbean. And then it goes off into a whole long conversation that I tell them about my culture. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that, yes, coming from Trinidad, where we don't necessarily have a strong operatic culture, for instance. And that seems to be the route that I'm going in, given the last couple of jobs and experiences I had. I think that is actually a benefit rather than disadvantage, because for a while I thought, wow, a lot of these people in the operatic field have, they started at like 3-4 years, starting doing, exposed to the art forms, hearing bel canto opera or verismo for so long that it's in their system. We are not necessarily like that in the Caribbean. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that in itself causes a disadvantage, but it doesn't. The degree at Temple gave me the technical and knowledge base information to be able to operate within the field. But then my Trinidadian culture, and I think a lot of people they tell me one of the best feedback comments I get from my teachers and from the orchestra when I conduct, I'm usually clear, I would hope, but it's usually the energy that I bring to the ensemble, and I don't think that is a me thing personally. I think that came from my Trinidadian upbringing, because Trinidadian people are naturally very animated people, very exciting, very engaging people. We use our eyes a lot, and that serves as a big boost in my conducting an operatic career. I mean, in opera, the emotions are like usually, it's moving very fast. It's very animated. And I think coming from Trinidad, where, I follow on Instagram all of the content creators, and, I share it with my friends here in the US as well. And they love to see it. They love to hear the accent. They love to see how we, one of my roommates, for instance, he picked up from me because I say it a lot, boy, and and I'm really open, and I do it in the orchestra as well too. Sometimes we were rehearsing we were doing Copeland's Hoedown Rodeo, Hoedown from the Sweet Rodeo, and this is what an orchestra in Ohio. And they got something, and the percussion section was just in the groove with the cellos, and out of nowhere, I just said, boy, in the rehearsal, and everybody, they laughed, and I think people, that actually serves as a major push forward in my career, as opposed to like holding me back. My Trinidadian personality. And cultural identity. I mean, alongside cooking the food, because,
Of course.
I've been termed the curry maestro here because I cook, and, I'm very proud of that title, by the way.
I have to say this. So when we're going to see some classical music TikToks where, they'll be grooving, and they'll just say, and said, boy, it'll be thanks to you. You will have successfully,
What?
exported part of the culture.
The most hilarious part of that is because I can actually picture the moment when you said it, and I can actually picture how the orchestra reacted and stuff like that. That is so
I
hilarious.
mean, I think locals might not understand because we'll take it for granted.
Yes.
Ah, boy. Because that expression sums it up right there in the pocket. You could feel there in the pocket.
Yes.
They could feel there in the pocket. But they have no idea what it is that you just said.
And I would say conducting is the less you can say and the more you can
show.
You can show is you're on the money.
Yeah.
So in that case, me saying, boy, I didn't have to say it to the orchestra, yes, good, let's do it like that a second time. They knew that that was where it was supposed to be, and it increases the satisfaction, it increases the enjoyment of the music, and that just makes the whole experience a very positive and enjoyable.
Ironically, that directly answers at least part of my initial question. The music experience allowed them to immediately understand what it is you were saying, even if they never heard the expression before.
Yes. Listen, it's interesting that you said, being from the Caribbean, it was not a hindrance, it wasn't a disadvantage, it was actually the push. So I think if we all kind of leaned into that a little bit more, then we won't take the experiences for granted, and we won't take ourselves and our talents for granted. We won't think that this is how we do it here, and this is very nice and comfortable. If I take the leap of faith and I go across there and I be myself in the most authentic way possible, because I think knowing Andrew, he's one of those very rare souls that no matter what happens, Andrew will always be Andrew, and there are a lot of people who are like that. And once you just carry yourself in that authenticity as much as you can, and always, if you can, even in the work, even with the boy moment.
Have you seen the reverse? Have you seen anyone trying to play the role that they think they need to play in order to get ahead, and they're not necessarily being authentic in the spaces, the creative spaces you're in?
Yes, I think there are genuine people who are like that, for sometimes the not so great reasons, but also sometimes, I would say the music business is a cutthroat business. It's not an easy one at all. And just like in Trinidad, in the world at large, everyone knows everyone in the music business. And so sometimes people, feel the need to sometimes, put on a facade to get certain things. And I don't know, my personal opinion is human beings will respond when they get a sense of genuineness, when they see you as a person. And the higher I deal with people up the
hierarchy?
I don't want to say bureaucratic ladder, but the higher the position is, the more I realize that people, they want to deal with you on a very practical, humanistic level. And they want to get to know you as a person. And so, I always endorse and try to encourage, just be you as a person, and people will respond to that.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Andrew. I think that's very important for all of us to learn, not just in the music business, but in all industries. I can say that.
Yeah, but you don't have to be abroad for that to matter. That could apply even if you're still here.
Exactly. That can apply even if you're still here. There's success locally as well. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It was greatly appreciated, and I know the audience is going to love it. I know we are all, as I speak for myself as your friend, I speak for DCFA people, I hope, and I speak for the Trinidad and Tobago, where we say we're very proud of you, and we wish you all of the best, all of the continued success in your endeavors. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Very proud, but come home soon.
Come home soon.
I will be.
Bring it back.
I'm yearning for doubles for the longest while.
Boy.
All right. Trinidad.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed it as well.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. And this Trinidad and Tobago, thank you so much. We will be right back. Taking a quick break. Don't go away.